reconciliation in Halifax a year ago, and it matters to me, truth and reconciliation. And Isabelle has written a book, Out of the Depths. And in it, she had written to me, Dear Elna, keep the healing circle strong. And when I heard about planning this event, I said it is important that we have Isabelle here and that we hear her voice. Before I turn it over to Isabelle, I just want to offer her a gift in her tradition of tobacco. So I'm very honored that Isabelle came.
Thank you. That's it? I was waiting for all day. Tobacco. Why do we give each other tobacco? Well, tobacco on Turtle Island was only one of two plants that were cultivated. The other one was corn. And the legend is a very short legend. The legend about tobacco is that my people were starving. They didn't have any food for the winter, and grandmother called in her son and told him that you have to kill me if you want our people to live, to survive. And the son said, no, I'm not gonna kill you. And she said, well, it's either that or our whole nation will die. So he went up to have a vision quest and talked to the Creator, and the spirits told him that the grandmother was right and that they would have to kill her. So they killed her, and her instructions were to put her bones and her body. Well, we're talking about like people a long time ago, right? To drag her bones all over the field and to leave the area. That was a sacred area, and to come back at some specific time. So that's what they did. They took her bones and they had a ceremonial burial, and they left the area. And when they came back in the spring, or the planting season, there were two plants growing where her bones and her body had been scattered. And the two plants were tobacco and corn. And when we give each other, when she gave me this tobacco, I think about the first grandmother. We call her Chinugumechinen, our grandmother, all of our grandmother. We have the same grandmother. And that's why we hold sacred tobaccos in honor of grandmother, and also corn. And that's how you honored me. Thank you. All right. My sessions are going to be cut in half. My first teaching is at 11:15, right up until 12:30. And the next one is this afternoon. This morning, the first, it's going to be spent in teaching. I'm going to be giving you several teachings, and they're all going to be on video. And if you want to view the teachings later, because sometimes we don't take in everything, it's so different. My culture is so different from your culture. And when I go to your I'll say universities. It takes me a long while to process what you're saying, because I have to make it fit in line, adjust it, modify it. So the same thing is going to be, I'm going to make it easy for you, and we're going to videotape all my teachings. everybody can have a copy. I also want to talk about the talking circle ceremony. And take this on here and just leave me this. This is the schedule. The talking, oops, sorry. Sure, pass them around now. One each. One. In the talking what I'm passing around is an explanation of what we're doing today, and the talking circle is a ceremony. In our culture, it's a sacred ceremony, and we go through. We have protocol we have to follow. But I'm not expecting you to follow. I'm expecting you to follow the protocol, but I'm not expecting you to do the opening, which I usually smudge and bless people. Those of you who want to be, I'm not going to smudge. I'm not going to do that. But I will, I'll do her first. Use her as a guinea pig. And if you want the blessing, you just stand up and we'll go around and we'll bless everyone. And what I do is I use the eagle feather. First, I want to tell you about the origin of the talking stick ceremony. It was a talking stick. And I brought my talking stick to show you. And you want to get that? Please. Okay. And this was a talking stick that my second husband carved for me for a women's meeting we had way back in 1967, 68, I don't know, a long time ago anyway. And I've been taking it to talking circles for Indian residential school survivors for at least since the Aboriginal Healing Foundation started. And I would say that over 1,000 people have used this talking stick in talking circles to talk about their traumatic experiences at the Indian residential school. Because it's so, it holds so much memories. I'm giving you a choice today whether you want to go that deep into your history and use this talking stick for the talking circle, or if you want to use an eagle feather. But first, hear the story about the talking stick. When I was a little girl, I'm 81 now, I would say about 75, 76, 77, 78 years ago. I don't know if I was listening when I was 80 years ago. But anyway, people used to come to my house, my father's house, my parents' house. Elders used to come. And the elders that came, my first teachers, were not 60 years old, or 70 years old, or 80, or even 90. They were 100, 90 and 100 years old. And they used to walk through the woods, and we had no cars, and they would still walk for miles to come to each other's houses. And the elders, some of them could not see very well. They couldn't hear very well. They were shaky. Their hands were full of arthritis. And they were very elderly, very feeble. And they all had canes. All had a cane. And they sit in a circle. And my father, they would have a fire, and my father would take out the tobacco, and he would pass it around to all the elders, and they would fill their pipes and light their pipes. And that was the opening of the ceremony. After that, nobody spoke, nobody moved around, everybody was quiet. The elders were going to talk. Sometimes they would sit there a long while before they said anything. They'd fall asleep even. And one of them got ready to talk, took his cane, or her cane. Oh, gonna cry. And they'd say, Gaskla, Gaskla. The talking circle has started. Gaskla doesn't mean anything. It's just an expression. But it means I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to tell a story. And when a person is talking and then there's a pause and nobody talks, an elder would, Gaskla means keep the story going. And that's what this talking stick represents to me and to our people. It's a sacred thing. The other sacred thing we have for our ceremonies and we use for our talking circles is the eagle feather. The eagle feather, the reason why we switched from talking sticks to eagle feathers is because sometimes people get upset when they are holding the talking stick and they, not meaning to, they'll swing it around and they'll get all upset and they're just like the talking stick when they're, you know how some people talk with their hands? When they have a talking stick in their hands, they do the same thing. And I'm there like, oh gosh, the talking stick is going everywhere and I'm afraid somebody will get hit. So we switched to the eagle feather. The eagle feather represents, of course, it's the eagle. And the Mi'kmaq people used all kinds of feathers. It wasn't necessarily an eagle feather. You should see the headdresses, like they had feathers sticking out every which way. But anyway, the eagle feather comes from the eagle, and the eagle is the bird that flies the highest of all the birds. And when we do our smudging and we make our smoke, our fire, the smoke rises up and the eagle will come and take our prayers up to the Creator. And that's why we use the eagle feather. So right now, you can decide whether you want to use the talking stick or the eagle feather for our talking circle this afternoon. Want to think about it a bit? Henry? I'll go for that. Oh, we're saying go for that. Quote from the apology. The other teaching I want to give is you want to move these things here, because I want to do a teaching of the history. Don't let that open. About the revival of Native spirituality. Why does it need to be revived? Well, because it was demonized by the church and the churches. They thought that we were devil worshippers because we did things like this, and all these symbols that you see here. Those are our totems, that, you know, on the talking stick. That when the Europeans saw that, they said that was the worshipping the animals. Those were animals are our family totems. And that's just one reason why it was demonized. But anyway, I'm going to explain to you why we find Native spirituality is so important to us, because it belongs to us. It's ours. It's our heritage. It's our teaching. So I'm going to bring this in. So should have wheels on it. All right. This is. Can you see it? All see it? Okay. This is. Excuse me back. Okay. This is a timeline. This is the present, right here. We'll talk about the future if we have time. This is the present. Each of these lines represents 1,000 years. It's 1,000 years. This is 2,000 years. What happened 2,000 years ago? Oh gosh, you're in the church? Yes, Christianity was born. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, all kinds of things happen here, but we're editing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10,600 years ago. There's archaeological evidence in Debert at the habitation site where the artifacts have been carbon dated 10,600 years ago. That means the Aboriginal people were in this area 10,600 years ago. At the site, they found evidence of black ochre, which means that there were ceremonies were going on there, because black ochre is not found in Nova Scotia. And our spirituality sustained us all this time. And then the Europeans came 500 years ago. And our native spirituality was demonized for 500 years. With the Indian residential school experiences, when the survivors of the Indian residential schools in Canada took Canada to court, they won. It was the turning point for Native people finally to say whatever they wanted to say, tell their stories. And that's when the talking stick was revived, the talking stick ceremony. It was the survivors who revived the talking stick ceremony. And how we did it was because our culture is not written down, it's oral. We used to have meetings like this, conferences, and we would meet, excuse me, on some reserve where a person would be receptive to Native spirituality, because we were all converted as Christians. And we too were taught that Native spiritual beliefs were Satan worship. So there's a lot of Native people on the reserve who still believe that Native spirituality is Satanism. So what we did, we used to gather together, just underground. We went underground, and we'd hold talking circles. And we'd sit outside, and we'd eat outside, and we'd camp. We'd camp for 4 days. And we'd talk from sunrise to sunset, with a break in between for lunch. And in the evening we would drum and chant and dance. And the firekeeper kept the fire going for 4 days. We still do that. We have firekeepers. And together we pieced together our core beliefs. And the question was, we had one question we had to answer. What was the question? What did your grandmother teach you? What did your mother teach you? What did your father teach you? What did your auntie say about women's roles? What did your father teach you about hunting? What about sweat lodges? How do you smudge? What's the smoke form? What's the pipe? What's the sacred pipe form? And over the years, about 20 years, we started to gather our information. No one was allowed cameras, no tape recorders, no note-taking. You had to remember everything. Remember it, keep it in here, go home and teach it. And that's how we began to revive our native spirituality, our spiritual beliefs. No non-native persons were allowed. Non-native means black immigrants. No immigrants were allowed in our talking circles. We were accused of racism, but that's not what it was. What it was is that immigrants don't have their teachings of Aboriginal teachings. They have their own. Their own grandmother taught them how to their beliefs. So our beliefs, our spiritual beliefs, are different for every culture. In 2008, when Prime Minister Stephen Harper apologized to the residential school survivors, their families and communities, on behalf of Canada and all Canadians, he was apologizing to two distinct cultural populations, the Aboriginal people and the non-Aboriginal people. And that's why we have these sessions today. We're trying to come together, bring the two together, reconcile these cultural differences and to close that cultural gap. How am I doing for time? It's just supposed to be 10 minutes. I have 45 minutes left? Awesome, I'm moving right along. Okay, then may I see my schedule? Talking circle. Okay, I'll do this teaching now. Everybody have a copy of, I think you're going to give me one, so I'm talking that. I'm talking. That's fine, thank you. Everybody has one of these? No? Okay, give him that. Oh, they're coming around? I'll put it on the board then, to make sure everybody has the same teaching. It's not complicated. This talking circle paradigm that you have in your hand, yeah, I don't need that. I can give it to somebody. Is the one that you have here is all done in bone hearing, but I'll use this one like this. The person that has the talking stick, or the talking feather, or the one that's talking, in this case, Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Okay? he's in the center, and he's apologizing. He's talking to, apologizing. What happened on the House of Commons was that only elected members are allowed to talk on the floor of the House of Commons. And when the Prime Minister finished reading the apology, the elected members of the three major parties, Liberal, help me, NDP and Conservative, they got to talk, to respond to the apology. They have their protocol that's now beginning to look at differences. They have their protocol that no one who has not been elected by the people is permitted to speak at the House of Commons. And what happened here was that the Speaker of the House is who they address. So the Prime Minister and the elected leaders addressed the Speaker of the House. That's their protocol. In order for non-native people to speak, they had to pass a special law or some rule that they have in the House of Commons called Committee of the Whole. The Committee of the Whole is they had to vote whether Aboriginal people would be permitted to speak. They were apologizing to us, but we needed special permission to speak. So, what happened here? The Speaker of the House leaves. For us, the circle is broken. It's over. Now they're wondering why we don't forgive them. In that, they had their say, okay? Now we're having our say, the survivors. I'm so shaky. The survivors of the Indian residential school get to speak next. Now we're talking, the TRC. You go there, you switch on your TV, and you can hear our stories. It's our time. It's almost over. I think another year. Who else was affected? The apology was also apologized to families and communities, Aboriginal families and communities. This might be a little different because I had my niece do that, so just put in your notes if you want to. This would be the survivors, families, and communities get to speak next. Who speaks next would be the non-Aboriginal people on whose behalf that apology was made. That would be you guys. When we finish telling our stories, and the communities and the descendants tell their stories, how the Indian residential school system affected them, then you will know why you are apologizing for it. Right now you don't know what you're apologizing for because of that cultural rift between non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal people. We don't talk to each other. You don't know my culture. I know your culture because I was forced to learn it at the residential school, but you don't know mine. So but we're teaching you now. And when you feel that you have heard it all, then it'll be time to reconcile. Right now, reconciliation is premature. You can reconcile among yourselves, but if you try it now, go to the Aboriginal community Okay, so that's the non-Aboriginal circle. After all this is said and done, then who comes in at the end will be the researchers and the analysts, because this is our shared history. Somebody has to write this up. And that's why I encourage people, like, go back to school, learn the history, and so you can be a part of this. Like, if our shared history, it's nobody's history, it's all of us together. And that's it. That's what I want you to do, what I want you to think about, and I think you're already thinking about it because I can see your eyes there. I told you a lot of things that you never thought of before, right? What I want you to think about is, where do you fit in this paradigm? Where you're not there. You're not the Prime Minister. You're not an elected official. Are there any survivors here? Are there any families or relatives of survivors? Yeah, we have quite a few. This is your circle here. You're in here. You get to say how the school affected you. And start talking right away. Start thinking about it right away. Write, record, draw, do something. And the next one would be the Aboriginal communities. Anybody from the Aboriginal community would be here. The non-Aboriginal community. This is where most of you are. Is that where you think in this paradigm you are? And here would be the students and the researchers and the analysts and just people who are interested. Is there anybody here who feels that they don't belong, that the residential school doesn't concern them? Is there anyone here who feels that they belong in more than one circle? Is there anyone here who believes that they belong in 3 circles? Yeah, if you can't remember, just look on your paper I passed around your handout. Yeah, and if you think about it, you'll find out we have a lot of work to do. A lot of research still has to be done, and we're already starting it here today. And that's why I was so happy that Ella invited me to talk to a church group. I talked to a church group about 20 years ago, and we weren't ready. We weren't ready to listen to one another. We just butt heads. But now we are. In this circle, everybody is equal. There is no hierarchy in the circle. No matter what you do up there, in here, we're all equal. And that's the talking circle paradigm. Can I see that for a second? No, the other one. This afternoon, we're going to do we're going to have a talking circle right after, what is it, 1 o'clock? At 1:30. We're going to, and there are some things that we have to decide before we sit down. What topic did you want to talk about? Usually we focus in on one topic. Or if you don't, I got a note there, the topic I thought I would suggest would be first step toward reconciliation is dialogue. So I thought, that would be, you don't have to stick to it, but just so that we have some kind of referencing. Does confidentiality apply? Yes. That means what's said in the circle stays in the circle? Okay. That means you can't go out there and talk about it? Okay. Does informed consent apply? We're not going to the videotape, the talking circle. Just the teachings are videotaped. So we don't need informed consent. You're not going to be taped. Do you want your story? All these don't apply anymore. What specific purpose will this videotape serve? Well, for teaching purposes. What type of debriefing do the participants need and want? We'll talk about that at the closing, okay? Is smudging permitted in your building? The pastor told us that it was, but I'm not going to do the smudging. I'll just do the blessing, and I'll bless anyone who wants to after me and Emma do it. Okay, so let's do the blessing now, and you can stand up, and I need the eagle feather over there. Eagle feathers. Eleanor has been coming to my house since she saw me at the, give my story at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I've been giving her quite a few teachings, and she's been giving me quite a few of hers. So what I'm going to do is ground her. So we have to be grounded so that, what we hear from other people's stories, if they're traumatic, then we don't take them home. We don't take them home with us, okay? So, just stand. You want to take off your glasses, and I'll take mine. It's really hard because people need glasses. But the Hopi teachings, one of my teachers was a Hopi medicine man, and one of his teachings was take off all your jewelry, because people had to wound Mother Earth to get at those metals that adorn your body. So when you do a ceremony, take off your jewelry. People are scared to take their jewelry off because they think it's going to be stolen or something. Put it in your pocket. You don't have to if you don't want to. I don't expect that people to do it, but I'll tell you anyway, just in case. It's a teaching, okay? What direction is east? Where does the sun come out here? That way? Okay, what we do is, usually we start with the east because we're known as the people of the dawn. All along the eastern seacoast, the sun comes up first. And the other tribes called us Wabanaki, the people of the dawn, those who see the sunrise first, the dawn. And at dawn, you'll see before the sun comes up, there's a white light on the horizon. And that white light is a very spiritual place. And we're people of the dawn. We're spiritual people. And when we do our ceremonies, we face the east to honor that white light. And then we face that we're south, that will be south. I might just give the teaching first before I do the ceremony, then we'll do the ceremony. And then we turn south. The south represents fire and emotions. And we ask the Creator to heal our emotions, remove all bad emotions. Then we'll face west. And the west is represents the element water. And when we're facing that direction, we ask the Creator to inspire us, give us inspiration. And then we'll finish off in the north, and this is where we materialize all our dreams and wishes that we prayed for when we were facing east. So, and then we do that, and then that's why the circle is so important to us. And that's why it's like we ask people not to break that circle. And okay, I think that's enough teaching, and we'll start now. You can either videotape this ceremony or not. It's up to you. Okay. I'm going to say it first. We start with the face in the east. Okay. O Great Spirit of the East, assemble thee from the four corners of the universe to bless Elma's thoughts. Bless her eyes so that she will see only the good, speak only the good, feel only the good. Great Spirit, bless her hands so that she'll be able to do the work that she was put on this earth to do. Remove all sicknesses from this body, give it back to Mother Earth. Then you turn around, and then we ask the Creator, Great Spirit, remove all unseen fears, unseen fears, and anything that can hurt you behind your back, it won't hurt you. And then we say, Nogma. When that means it's over. Nogma. All right, then you can go back. All right. If I will go, I'm inside, I can't tell which is my left or right. I'll go this direction. And if you want me to bless you, you just step forward.